Hello, friends. Welcome aboard the Round Trip Stories podcast, where we share stories of moving around the world and back again, reflecting on the lessons we've learned along the way. My name is Tracy.
And my name is Melissa, and we are so glad you're joining us for today's episode. Our guest today is Justin Lau, adult third culture kid originally from Singapore who grew up in Japan and now works as a worship leader in London. Justin made the move to Japan at 3 months old and thrived in his international school community until he graduated at 17 years old. He shares stories with us about the warmth he holds for Japan in his heart and the deep connections he made with his international school friends. It was only when he had to move away from that community that he encountered difficulties. So buckle your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables and seats are in their upright positions as part one of Justin's round trip story gets ready for takeoff.
Welcome, Justin Lau, to the Round Trip Stories podcast. We're so privileged to have you on our show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, we are excited to get to hear your stories and share your stories with our listeners wherever around the world they may be. So as we get started, Justin, we are going to ask you a few questions first so that you can share with us a bit of your backstory. So tell us first a little bit about yourself and where you are now, and then tell us about your family and where you grew up.
Yes, so my name is Justin, as has already been said. I'm currently 32 years old, so I'm no longer a kid, but I am an TCK, an adult third culture kid. So I am Chinese Singaporean, which means that my heritage is Chinese, my ethnicity is Chinese, but my nationality is Singaporean. But I grew up in Japan. So my parents were Chinese Singaporean missionaries to Japan. And I was born in Singapore, but they carried a 3-month-old me, so just little baby Justin. So I got on the plane before I could even talk or walk, so that's quite an achievement.
So far, I'm not hearing anything confusing about identity and ethnicity and culture in being a Chinese Singaporean growing up in Japan. That sounds totally normal.
Exactly. I just waded through it with no issues at all. So I grew up in Japan and actually spent the first 18 years of my life there. I guess you ask what I'm doing now, so I'll just fast forward a bit to now. So I'm currently based in London in the UK. So I moved over to the UK in 2012 when I was 20 to study English literature at Durham University in the UK, which is in the north of England. And 12 years later, I'm still here.
All right.
Wow. I studied a BA in English Lit. I did an MA as well. And then I ended up working for my church as well as doing another MA in theology. And now I work as a worship pastor in London. So that's kind of that's my day job. Mm-hmm. And I also am a writer, so I love writing. And you could say that's my unpaid night job. If you like.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, I'm so glad that we get to interview you about your life growing up in Japan. And then also we get to hear about your, the rest of your story as well.
So Justin, tell us a story about growing up abroad as a TCK.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I, moved over to Japan as a baby and lived the first 18 years in Japan, which was my host country. And I think because I moved so young and because I grew up there wasn't a sense of me being a TCK. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is it wasn't that I felt Japanese. It was just very normal and natural for me to have all my different cultural influences. And I think the biggest thing that contributed to that was the fact that I went to an international school. So this was a American Christian school, and I went there for 11 years. I went there from second grade all the way to 12th grade when I graduated. And bar going back to Singapore for summer holidays, that's where I grew up. And so I had a very interesting bubble that I lived in. It was the international school bubble, which I'm sure, as you know, in conversations with other TCKs, I'm sure many of them have been to international schools. And one of the things is the very unique culture where it is very multicultural, but no one feels like they're different. Everyone feels they're the same because you have this common experience of the whole mixture of various cultures and backgrounds. So I grew up with my friends were, you know, Japanese, were Korean, were North American, or a mixture. You know, we had a lot of mixed race people in our school as well, and so that created a really unique bubble that I lived in Japan. And then on top of that, there was the additional layer where I look East Asian. So even though I wasn't Japanese, and even though I didn't have a Japanese name, I could speak Japanese, and I looked Japanese on first sight. So there wasn't any overt, people look at me and think, oh, you're a foreigner. You know,
right. Like, they didn't look at you when you were walking through a grocery store and wonder, where is he from? Why is he here?
Exactly.
Right.
And contrast that to a lot of my white friends. Some of them were even born and raised in Japan and speak Japanese like native, but they will always, purely by external appearance, look completely foreign and look completely an outsider.
Right.
So in a way, I lived, even though we spoke English at home and English at school, but I could speak Japanese outside, there were a lot of common things that happened. So, you know, I did piano recitals. You know, I went to Kumon, which is after-school tutoring.
Oh, yes. We know about Kumon.
Yes, Kumon. But there were a few times where I did realize that there was something different about me compared to my surroundings. Now, I didn't know this until recently, but my mum said that when she brought me over as a baby, me having big eyes for an East Asian kid actually helped draw attention from the other mothers in the neighborhood, because they're like, oh, your kid is so cute, he's got such big eyes. And actually that ended up being an opportunity for her to be able to interact and create relationships.
How interesting.
And then when I went to Japanese elementary school for just 3 months before I went to an international school. But because my parents weren't Japanese and because we didn't speak Japanese in the house, there are a lot of things that were deemed common sense that I didn't know. So I remember the first day of elementary school, first grade, me and 2 other kids went up on stage to introduce ourselves to the whole in the gymnasium, all the kids sitting in front. And so they passed around the mic. The first kid introduced themselves, great. Second kid introduced themselves, great. It came to me. And now what I said was, I'm going to say it and then I'll try and explain it. What I said was, Justin Lau kun desu. Now, kun is like the thing you add at the end of a boy's name.
Okay.
So it's similar to like how you put san at the end of an adult name, like Miyamoto-san.
Sure.
So it's like Mr., except kun is for boys.
Okay.
Now, what I didn't know was the faux pas was you don't ever refer to yourself as that. So it was like calling myself Mr. Justin Lau, but the boy version, the kid version.
Yeah, sure. So other people would refer to you that way, but you don't refer to yourself that way.
Exactly. And the whole gym erupted in laughter. And I felt so ashamed and embarrassed. And I was like, what's going on?
What did I do?
And it wasn't until I was walking home with my friends and they were like, you can't say kun when you introduce yourself. And I was like, okay, I learned my lesson.
Okay, so back up for just a second. So did you have any siblings?
I do have a younger brother. So he's 3 years younger than I am. And he was born in Japan.
And so your family spoke English in your house. Now, did your parents grow up speaking English?
So English is the lingua franca in Singapore.
So that's why your family spoke English at home.
Yes.
So I'm curious, it's interesting to me that you attended the Japanese school for 3 months and then switched to the international school.
Yeah.
Is there a story there?
The good reason, I think, is that my parents wanted me to have an English education to make sure that my opportunities were broad. I think they had at the time in mind potentially going back to Singapore. But obviously it was also an American school, so a lot of my friends after graduation eventually went to the States for college, for example. So I think it was just a way of widening the breadth of opportunity for me in the future.
Got it.
And I'm really glad that I did go to an international school, but I guess I don't know if you call it a downside, but a repercussion of that is that I actually didn't really interact with Japanese society much from the age of 6. So immediately after that, what I shared about the introduction gone wrong. But from the age of 6 to 18, I was completely enclosed within that bubble. And when you are with other TCKs, you also don't realize you are a TCK. And there was just one moment I remember when I was about 15. So I was in high school and I went to the train station to get a haircut. Now this was one of those 1,000 yen for a 10-minute haircut, like $10 for a 10-minute haircut. It was called QB House. And I remember sitting in the chair and this guy, Japanese guy, was cutting my hair and he asked me, I see and hear you and your friends walk by every day. What language do you speak?
How interesting.
And I was like, what do you mean, what language do we speak? And he was like, well, I hear a bit of Japanese, but then I hear a bit of English, and then I don't understand fully what you're saying. And then that was the first time I realized that we spoke in Japlish, which is a mixture of Japanese and English. And that's very common in other places. I think Spanglish is one, Franglais is another. But our version in Japan was Japlish. And so we didn't even comprehend, we didn't even process that was what we spoke. And to a Japanese person, it sounded completely alien and almost like gibberish. But that was when I realized, okay, there's something different going on with our bubble within the international school that is not happening in Japanese society.
Yeah. And I think that it's fair to say that, again, maybe whether you want to call it a downside or not, I think it just illustrates the reality that we have to make choices. And your parents made the choice to have you, on the international school path. And it would have been a very different experience, for better or for worse, if you had stayed in Japanese education. And just the reality is that you can't do both.
No.
So, we have to make those really hard choices, and we don't ever know if we someday would wish that we could have done something different. But just like we can't live in 2 countries at the same time.
Exactly.
We have to make those choices.
Okay, so Justin, tell us a story about something you loved or some things you loved.
Yes. Well, shout out to karaoke. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go listen to the previous episode on music.
Yes, go back and listen to episode 24 about music.
Yes. But I think related to that, I talked a lot about the joy of being able to go and sing in the karaoke room with my friends. But the greatest thing about living in Japan was all the friends I did meet and make and absolutely had a ball with. And it's hard to say it was a specifically Japanese experience, but it was my international school experience in Japan, which meant that, again, it is such a privilege and a joy to be able to have friends from all over the world at a young age. Like I said, I had Japanese friends, I had Korean friends, I had American friends, and you learn different languages. You learn snippets of them. Not that I'm advocating swearing, but some of my first Korean words were swear words. But with the friends, when we hung out. I meant after school, we'd just sit in front of the convenience store and just hang out and chat and I guess do what kids do. But it was just in the Japanese context. But it also wasn't entirely foreign because we were acclimatized, we were acculturated, we spoke Japanese fluently. You know, yes, occasionally people might look at us and think, oh, they're a bit weird, they're a bit different. But at the end of the day, you know, we could get around, we were fine. But I think a lot of what I did experience within my school and the opportunities I got was very, very special. You know, so I mentioned that I'm a worship pastor currently, and I would say a lot of my foundation for music came from my school. You know, I remember singing 3-part harmonies in elementary school. I played piano, I did violin for a year, I did oboe for 7 years. You know, I played in a band, I formed an a cappella group. Ooh, this is a good story. So I formed an a cappella group in high school in 11th grade, so that's junior year in American terminology. So I called ourselves the junior guys. But in our senior year, we ended up applying for and making it onto a national television a cappella competition in Japan.
Oh, wow.
So there were about 600 teams that applied, and about 18 teams got to the final, and the final was the one that was televised and broadcasted. And that was an experience, you know, for a 17-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we felt very grown up. We had to sign all these waivers, and then we commuted to the big Fuji TV building in Odaiba, which is really famous, and we got to meet all these celebrities. And I don't think I could fully comprehend what was going on at the time, but getting to sing our song on TV and then being recognized on the streets afterwards was always a fun thing too.
And so now let's talk about something that was hard. Tell us a story about that.
Yeah, so the reason why so far I've shared and it's been really positive was because it was really positive for me. I loved my experience of growing up in Japan and going to the international school. I mentioned earlier that my family and I would go back every summer for maybe a few weeks for a summer holiday to Singapore. And so Singapore wasn't entirely foreign to me either, but I only knew it on a week-by-week basis. And in 2015, I would have been about 13. My parents ended up taking a sabbatical, a furlough, and we actually went to the States and Canada for 3 months over the summer, and then we went back to Singapore for about 4 or 5 months. So that was a good 7 months away from what was my home and where all my friends were. And that ripped me to shreds. That tore me apart. You know, I just, especially at the age of 13, which I think is quite formative. So that was really hard. So I ended up doing internet schooling in Singapore for those 5 months.
Oh.
And that was hard. It wasn't even homeschooling. It was just me in front of a screen for 8 hours a day in a country where I didn't have any friends. And that was devastating for me because I think you've probably gleaned as I've been sharing how important friends have been for me. You know, they have been, in a way, a lot of ways, family for me as well. I had my family, but friends as well were family for me. And so being apart from them in that half year when I was 13 was especially excruciating. And that was not a good time.
And I mean, we all know now after COVID too, that kids in front of screens isn't the best, you know, it can really take a toll on mental health as well. So you were going through a lot of changes in education, and then also your surrounding, your people had changed.
So what was it like when you got back, re-entering into and reconnecting with your friends? Did that take a while before you felt, you know, reconnected, or were there lingering effects from that separation that were hard to kind of get over?
So thankfully not. And actually, it was like I'd never left. My friends welcomed me back with open arms. I was delighted. I mean, I had changed a bit in that year. So the three main things they said was, oh, you've grown. Oh, your voice broke. Oh, you got contacts.
So, those are key growth years, right?
Yes. But other than that, it was like I'd never been away. I was so glad to be back with people. But I would say that then maybe it's I've never thought about this. Maybe it's an extension of that feeling of being torn apart, where when I graduated from high school in 2009, and after graduation we did an all-nighter as a class. We went to the seafront, and just spent time with each other. And then when the sun rose and it was time to say goodbye, and it hit me that I was not going to see most of these people for who knows how long, maybe even forever. I was the first one in the class of 50 to break. I sobbed and wept in a way and started a chain reaction. But
I bet.
Yeah.
But I realized in that moment, wow, I might not see some people. And you know what? Most people I have seen, but there are a few really close friends I had at the time in 2009 whom I have not seen in person since.
And that can happen, anytime people graduate from high school, but how much more is that amplified when you are all from different places in the first place? And so who knows where you're all going to scatter to after that. And just going back to that time when you were 13, and I'm grateful that you were able to reconnect with your friends when you got back, but it doesn't take away the pain of the separation that you experienced while you were away, especially when you're young. So 7 months when you're 13 is very different from compared to 7 months when you are 30 or 40 or 50. And I just think that it's really important for us, maybe as parents, to not minimize the pain that kind of separation can cause to our kids. And even as the ones that are sometimes hurting, that we shouldn't dismiss our own pain either.
I was wondering how big your Christian international school was. I mean, you have a graduating class of 50. That's pretty big.
We had about 400 students from kindergarten to 12th grade.
And then what was the turnover of students?
That's a good question. We did have people join and leave at various times, but I was probably one of maybe 20-ish people, 15 to 20-ish people who actually were there from elementary school. So
from your graduating class?
From my graduating class. So we stayed all the way.
That's a huge percentage.
Yeah, that's impressive for an international setting.
Yeah.
It's hard to say now, but that's the thing. It wasn't like I was saying goodbye to friends of only 2 or 3 years. I was saying goodbye to people of 11 years. And it was so formative for me and for all of us, I think.
All right. Well, Justin, you have such gems of ideas and experiences, and we're going to start our concluding questions right now. So the first one is, what do you wish your parents would have realized or known as they were raising you as a third culture kid, or even after?
Yeah, I think the awareness potentially of how difficult it was going to be for me. I don't rue them at all in the slightest. They were first-gen Christians as well as missionaries back in the 90s, before a lot of good literature on TCKs and globalization and cross-cultural identity was written. But I think one of the things that I think it'd be safe to say they presumed was that I would maintain a connection with my Singaporean identity, which I didn't. I guess for those parents listening, really understanding and asking and being curious about what your children are going through, because their experience is going to be unlike anyone else's. You can read all the TCK literature in the world. Your child is going to have their unique experiences with their unique set of emotions and thoughts. And to be able to guide them through it, you need to know what that is, rather than trying to impose a formulaic, like blanket solution.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really wise. And rather than assuming that you know what they are experiencing or feeling because this is what other people have experienced or felt, we have to actually ask and listen, because like you said, every experience is going to be different.
And for me as a parent of TCKs, I forget that they had, I mean, of course I know they had these 8 years in China, but then it still affects them. Maybe not as much now because we've only almost been here for 7.5 years, but it still flavors their life.
Yeah.
Why they are the way they are.
So as we get ready to kind of wrap up part 1 of your interview and your story, tell us, what do you value most about your story, particularly where you grew up and how you grew up?
Yeah, I think meeting so many different people from so many different parts of the world has only increased my knowledge and awareness, but also empathy and compassion for people. The familiarity I have with different peoples and different cultures, you could even say cultural competency, I guess, in being bilingual, speaking English and Japanese. All of these things only help to serve my ability to bridge people, and even to this day, it's still something that has given my life so much value in being able to not only create those relationships with so many different types of people, but also to maintain them. And I love that about my life, and that's something that I would never change.
Yeah. Good.
What a gift. And it wasn't all roses, right? You had a beautiful international school experience growing up in Japan. It sounds like you had this really strong community. But I mean, it wasn't all roses. And even so, you value that. You value your experience and all those people that have helped to make you who you are and influenced your life.
Completely. I think one of my prevailing attitudes in life is not to regret anything in the past. Not to say that I've never made mistakes, but everything is a learning opportunity. Everything has shaped me to be who I am today. So why bother crying over what could have been or what couldn't have been? I take what happened and implement it and apply it to my life now and look towards the future.
Thank you, Justin, for sharing your round-trip stories from Japan. You have a deep fondness for the country where you grew up, and more for the people who grew up around you. Meeting so many classmates from different places throughout your childhood gave you a foundational start in your empathy and cultural competence, not to mention a cappella singing. So, what happened when Justin returned to Singapore after high school from mandatory military service? You'll have to make a return trip to our podcast for part 2 of Justin's round-trip story.
Want the podcast equivalent of early boarding and first-class seating? Be sure to subscribe to the Round Trip Stories podcast in your favorite podcast app and sign up for our email list at roundtripstories.com so you'll never miss an episode. We believe that sharing stories helps our understanding of the world grow larger while the distance between us grows smaller.
As this episode lands, we hope these stories have encouraged you, helped you find some more of your belongings, and made your baggage a little lighter. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.